Thank you for joining us. This is live with Miami's Community News, and our guest is Javier Banos, community activist, attorney, and CPA.
Thank you very much, Michael.
And welcome back. And so here we are. We're almost in the new year. All right,
Yes,
it's going to be November in a week or so. And we haven't met in a while. So tell us what's been going on in the city of Coral Gables and what you think is going to be going on.
Well, I tell you, it's being, at least for me, it's been a fruitful tax season. It ended on Friday with the extension, so I've been pretty busy going back to work and being engaged in my practice. But I haven't left the city. I've become engaged. I'm serving on various boards, including the budget advisory board for the city. And it's been an eventful few months for what's supposed to be a simple start of the new commission to the city of Coral Gables. The two new commissioners are learning their ropes, but I think Commissioner Rhonda Anderson is hitting it out of the ballpark. She's managed to place a moratorium on what we know as the Mediterranean Ordinance, a permitting of the Mediterranean Ordinance in the city of Coral Gables, and that's been taking place since the end of July. And the goal there was, a big part of the message, at least in my election as well as hers, was the discontent that the residents had with the level of construction that's going on in the city. And they're clearly, there's general perspectives that have changed with this in the city, but the main concern, the main issue the residents seem to have is that this growth that is just disproportionate and certainly not it doesn't go with the neighborhood, right? So, and part of that is this Mediterranean Ordinance, which is sort of the key to what it is to be Coral Gables, right? It was a creature of the 80s, as a reactionary creature to essentially some of the non-Mediterranean architecture that went up in the Gables during the late 70s, early 80s. And there needs to be a need to revamp it because it's not being utilized to its true intention.
So the moratorium for the Mediterranean ordinance means what?
Well, what it means is that, or at least the intent of what it was, right? So what the city would try to do was to incentivize a different type of architecture within the city, right? So what they were trying to do is say, all right, so don't construct these ugly boxes, 80s, utilitarian Soviet-looking buildings, right? Why don't you go ahead and utilize architecture that is inspired by George Merrick's vision, by the City Beautiful movement, by sort of Mediterranean architecture from Spain all the way to southern Spain to all the way to southern France and Italy, and try to incorporate those features within the buildings. If you do that, okay, as an incentive, or because we know that it's more expensive, the city will give these firms, architectural firms, as developers, an incentive of essentially an extra height, okay, and essentially an extra mass to the building. Essentially, and I'm sure there's going to be an architect that's going to tell me that I'm wrong, but you can essentially build up a 20% higher and bigger by virtue of creating.
So, but the moratorium does what? Stopped all of that for
a
while.
Because what the intention and what they were trying to do is to say, all right, it's being bastardized, right? It's not being utilized to what is true intent. We have buildings have gone up that are massive, okay, and they have utilized and they have gone in as quote unquote Mediterranean architecture because to a large extent there's been a sort of a check in the box to the Board of Architects who's there to create that structure. And so, if you meet A, B, D, C, you do everything that you're supposed to do, yes, you get the bonus and we move on. Well, what's happened is there's been a real awakening among the Board of Architects, to the credit of the chairwoman and to the credit of many of the members there, to say, all right, let's go back to intent. Let's go back to what we really meant for this structure to go back in. We really wanted to incentivize architecture that looked like the Mediterranean style, the City Beautiful movement that was part of Judge Merritt's vision. So why don't we go ahead and go back to be true of that rather than make it so formulaic?
So it's sort of on a pause for a while.
It is on a pause for a while now. After doing a significant work, including its chairman, Mr. Pardo, who Felix Pardo, who I personally call him the new savior of Coral Gables, but he didn't like the moniker. Felix was very eloquent at sort of giving, and he's far more well spoken and far more true to his architectural roots and knowledge than I would ever be able to give him justice. But what he did was to say, look, let's try to figure out a way in which we can change this ordinance in a way that it makes sense. So that went back to the commission this last hearing, which was the hearing last week, and that was sent also to the Planning and Zoning Board. And the level of input that was put forward and the level of community interaction was remarkable. Okay, it is very evident that the community wants this ordinance and they want these changes. There's a few things here and there that we can nitpick. Okay, there's actually a further incentive for extra height if you have lower density, which was part of the idea behind what the board tried to explain is that what they want to, or this committee, that hot committee that was put together to revamp this ordinance, and what they try to do, or they try to explain was, look, if we wanted to make this true to its root, we would like it not to be abused, right? So this is what we're going to do to sort of incentivize a lower density building. So you could go a little bigger if you want, but lower density means a larger unit, right? Less parking, and a sense of what Coral Gables should be like. There are places here in the city of Miami, which even one of the members was saying that they're talking about essentially micro units, co-living. Right?
So one of the
they
things
want to get away from that.
we realize is Google resets algorithms all the time, and
Right.
Facebook and Twitter, and everybody does it because they need to tweak these things.
Right.
No reference to tweets, right?
It's
But they
tweaked.
need to adjust that stuff, and we see that all the time. And behind our office, directly west of us, I'm starting to get a feel of Coconut Grovey, Coral Gables look and feel.
Right.
A lot of trees, a lot of plants, and you look at some of the homes, they're redone in the model so often that we see in Coral Gables.
Right.
So it is sort of spreading out. Let's talk about, if we could for a minute, the buildings that are on US 1.
Yes.
All right. I don't know how many square feet that is, but it looks like, how tall is that building?
Way too tall.
12, 15?
And look, that's part of the reason. One of the things that happened in these few months is that one particular project that was supposed to go up on Pond residences was rejected by Planning and Zoning, precisely because of what you're talking about. Essentially, a building that was way too close to the sidewalk. In that particular case, I wanted to vacate a portion of the street, and it was going to be granted back to the city. And they want to do a park, but it wasn't a real. It was most of a urban park. It wasn't really a park the way Coral Gables is used to, and it was going to be 17 stories right next to a neighborhood. So that continues to be the protest of the folks in Coral Gables, and part of this movement, which has been, to the credit of Commissioner Anderson, has been put forward, which is why she's, I think, the most popular politician in Coral Gables to this day. There was a Moxie did one of these surveys, and she is the most popular politician in Coral Gables. So Rhonda gets a lot of credit, at least from me, for being true to what she said she was going to do, and to actually put forward this idea, which I think is what the residents want. It's the same idea behind the US 1 buildings you're talking about.
Yep.
There were abuses of the original intention.
Isn't that what happens when something gets too extreme, and then the next thing that happens, hold on, all right,
Right.
they got away with it, all right, it's time to. By the way, my daughter and son-in-law and grandchildren moved in on the Gable side of Merry Christmas Park.
Oh, okay. It's
And so
Okay.
the first time I took them, walked them down the street, then walked them across where that yellow
Right.
flashing thing is. It was lighted. It was so great to
It
hold their
is.
hands and walk over there and let them play and not get hurt. I brought them back with no injury, so I was
Right.
pretty happy.
because you had to cross the street
Yes.
there. But look, that neighborhood is a gem, right? I think the only complaint that I got the entire time that I was there is that there were too many peacocks, right? that was the. So I walked the entire place. It's a
But let's
beautiful
talk about
place.
peacocks for a second.
Okay, sure.
They learn how to be really arrogant,
Yes, they
which
do.
is all these cars are stopping, so I won't have to look, right? And we see it all the time where they grow up with that. They learn from their parents, right? And they just have this. It's wandering. I hope they're not sitting on your home or on your
They're
roof line.
not. I can tell you, I don't have that problem. I do know people, neighbors who have it. Even here in South Miami and in the Gables, peafowl have become a problem in our community because they're these birds essentially are like chickens, right? They can proliferate, and they can go around fairly easily. And we just don't have a place where we can take them and sort of house them in a way that makes sense. So just like the exotic birds we were talking about before we started
Yep.
this process, they're just going to be part of our flora and fauna. So we,
And we've learned to live with that as we've learned to live with COVID.
right.
And so here we are, not quite post-COVID, but we're feeling it. All right,
Yes.
it's
Right.
it's definitely there that things have gotten a lot better,
Right.
and looks like there's lots of problems that are still going on, but it's sort of like that traffic accident on the Palmetto Expressway. Long after the accident's gone, they towed it away. It takes a long time for the traffic to to catch up. So, what are some of the things that are going on because of COVID, and that still we're waiting to clean that up?
Well, the biggest issues have been sort of the change in which our downtown and the business centers had to adjust for COVID, right? So there has been a movement sort of work from home. So just getting some of these large office buildings filled in has become a problem. There are some vacancies that have to be filled within Miracle Mile and in the adjacent areas. I think the business will come back. Okay, office retail is expensive, and so is office units. But there are plenty of them for sale, and the inventory it's not swelled. It's actually selling pretty quickly. So business is coming back to the Gables, and it's coming back to where it's supposed to be. On the budgetary side for the city, the only problem was we lost about, give or take, about $10 million, $12 million of revenue that was coming in from franchise fees and other fees that were typical use for if like the electricity, right? There wasn't as much electricity and cable use because the people were not
Right.
using the buildings, right? Because the offices were empty. So that's slowly coming back. Parking slowly coming back. And I think we're looking at 18 months before we have some degree of return to normalcy. The only question is to what degree are some of these changes that are just there, are going to be permanent.
So I studied McDonald's a little bit and Burger King, and I go to different ones and see about the lines for the drive-through. So we realized in the mornings between starting around 6:45, the line is completely around
Right.
the buildings. So one day I said, let me go inside, see if there's anybody inside. No one is inside.
Right.
They have 2 kiosks that are non-functioning, and they have 1 cash register. That is a phenomenon of the last 5 years, accelerated by COVID, right? And I got to tell you, I think that's a done deal, right?
I completely agree. I mean, my practice has been changed completely. It used to be that people used to be used to coming to the office to do their taxes, coming to meet with your lawyer, or anything else. I've seen about 50% of those clients, especially the tax clients, just send me the stuff via email. Okay.
It really is. When I look at lawyers and accountants, 10 years or so ago, I knew a couple of accountants who said, I'm going to be operating on my house. I go, really? Yeah. I said, don't your clients want it? He says, I don't think so. And so now it's like, I don't even want to go to your house or your office.
Right.
I just want to send you that stuff.
So, right. And look, it's like everything else, with practice. I think the most positive thing for me, I can tell you that going to court has become a pleasure. Okay, because I think when you first start come out of law school, you want to go to court. You have your briefcase, and you have your tie, and you have your suit, and you're so excited to go argue in front of the court. I think it's all pretty quickly, okay? Because you have to go there, pay for parking, go up the stairs, wait around till the judge is ready.
And then the old courthouse over there?
And the old courthouse, which
great.
I think remains closed, right? Because of everything else is going on with the structure of the building, etc. at that point in time, there's the judge may be in their garage, taking the Zoom meeting with all the hearings with a funny background behind them with their robes. But I'm working all the way up to the minute of the hearing, okay, and getting acquainted with whatever the case is. You do the hearing 5-10 minutes. If it's a longer hearing, an hour or whatever, you do the whole process, and and then you're done and you go back to whatever you're going to do. So it's become a lot more efficient to do it
So
that way.
it says something about habits. So we were doing that. We as a community were doing that thing for a long time, and now it's like, okay, it's different, right? And in case of going downtown, some of the times that's hours different,
Right.
right? And so we realize in our operation we have a couple of people that work from home, and it's fine. I've been one for 20 years, another one for 10 years, and people at the office are a little nervous. I said, so let me ask you something. Do you have Gmail? Yes. I said, so where's that?
Right.
I say, you have a phone? Where is that stuff?
Actually, I think Ryder, which is the shipping company, right? They did a study, and people actually were 20 to 30% more efficient working from home. So they're done with the process. A lot of people have downsized, and they have actually found smaller office space. So there is a the office aspect of it, especially if you can do it from a computer. I think that has changed a lot. I think daycare still is going to have to be open, and there's no way to get around that. There's grocery stores are going to have to be open. There's no way around that. But mostly, there's been a change in the way we approach work as a general rule.
And when we think of the old days,
Old days, 2 years ago, by the way.
yes, it's really incredible, and how we've got accustomed to it, and we've just grown into it. One of the challenges that we see here is there's not much water fountain conversations anymore, not much lunchroom conversations. So that gets some adjusting that we have to do. And so, but I think it's a done deal. I think that a lot of people that can work from home, that the employer and the employee are happy.
The only downside to that is the opportunity for advancement. It's going to be, especially in large institutions, it's going to be downgraded because a person is working from home. It's the human interaction that creates the ability to do
and you bring up a really good point, because if when you're there, the personality gets into the conversation rather, I don't know, I want to let this person go. But if they haven't been in the office in a year, and all it is,
right.
And you just go, okay.
Well, I mean, the same issue in my office with mediations, right? The idea of mediation is get everybody in a room and solve it, right? But now the room is virtual, okay? So the problem with that is, at least in 2 occasions, I found it to be less effective than it would otherwise.
When we look at the changes in how healthcare is being provided to patients, I was calling this one doctor, said, well, he's only does patients 1 day a week on new appointments. And so it's been so long for you that you have to come in, all right? And rather than on the virtual. So I said, so when would that be? 7 weeks later. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that, all right? Now, we understand healthcare. When you see a physician, all right, we're not self-diagnosticians. Sometimes they look at you and they see something. Maybe you're walking funny a certain way, or you're leaning a certain way, or maybe you have some growth that you don't really see. So it should be interesting to see how that really rolls out in a couple of years.
I mean, I think, look, if you're in therapy or if you're something, the interaction is mostly verbal, right? I think that probably can go online. I think going to see the doctor and for them to touch you and feel you, and, and get a sense of how well you are, I think that requires a degree of privacy and interaction that is a little different than what we've seen now.
No, years ago I went to my cardiologist, and I was just feeling terrible. And when I go in, he puts his hand on my shoulder and he goes, "What's going on?" I instantly felt better. It was just like, okay, great. It's just as you're saying, sometimes you want that sort of experience. Let's talk about, if you don't mind, some of the emotional and social issues that have gone on for people during COVID, and looking forward, some of the challenges they might have. Because I'm sure you've been in mediation and lawsuits and your own experiences.
Divorce certainly ticked up during the pandemic. I think if Perhaps you could deal with your spouse if the spouse was leaving for work every day, but if all of a sudden the spouse was there right next to you and you didn't care for the spouse, this it created a lot. In other words, you're putting the marriage in a pressure cooker, okay, by virtue of doing that. And I don't do a lot of divorce work, but that certainly ticked up because anecdotally and from my own clients uh, during that entire period. The other thing that has increased, unfortunately, has been probate work. Essentially, work that deals with the decedents because there's a lot of folks that have died, and unfortunately, folks have died very young because of this 48, 50, 59, and it's an unfortunate situation, but that has been the nature of the practice.
So in the state of Florida, a year and a half ago, maybe a little longer, only 2,000 people had died out of, not only, but out of 22 million. So there's 58,000 people, Floridians, that have died
Mm.
with the diagnosis of COVID. Yes, there's probably a whole bunch of other stuff.
Right.
That's more than Vietnam War.
It is.
And I remember being a kid go, 50,000 people died. Oh my goodness. All right.
Right.
And we have it in Washington, we have their names up there. And so I know that there's a whole family issues because there are 140,000 kids across the country that lost the caregiver.
Right.
And that causes tremendous stress on the
Look,
family.
you could say, and you could play devil's advocate and say, well, those people may have died anyway from other diseases because they were predisposed to death or whatever, and that may be true. Okay, but I think the stresses this thing puts in our health system and our body and our mental ability to deal with it, because there's a lot of I think a lot of people people have died because of the stresses around what the pandemic has done. So I think if overall probably the number is higher. I'm not sure we're going to get a memorial for it, but it is a very sad situation. I think people should get vaccinated and get over that hump, and hopefully we can get to a point in time where we can just look at COVID in the back mirror, and if we have to deal with it on a constant basis, then we'll just get boosters as we go along. But it will just be something in the past, something we can manage, like the flu.
So, and the stress on businesses, there are a lot that are doing fine. A lot of people are still, moving forward. And the vacancies that are out there, at some point relatively soon, there'll be people in there.
Yeah,
right?
I concur. The biggest issue actually business have had is finding employees. Okay, now the federal assistance that was in place ended last month, okay? And that has put a lot of people in the job market. So hopefully that scarcity of people have changed, but also people are afraid. People have moved around. Housing has become more expensive, so getting them to actually get a job is an issue. I mean, the real estate market is completely berserk, bunkers with the prices. So inflation has become a big problem as a consequence of the pandemic.
And speaking of employees, so for a long time I said, I'm not going to bring anybody else in the building. I'm not going to do that. All right.
Right.
Who's going to be here all day? We only had one case in a year and a half. All right. We were really
You did a great deal of
Yes.
work to stop it.
And it was like, and we're really proud of that, that we're able to do that. But still in the back of my head, if I want a young person, if they apply, and what if this, and you have all that conversation,
Correct.
and it's like, be sued, not be sued. What are you going to do? All that stuff is going to work its way out. And as the number of cases drop, we're going to learn how to deal with it. All right. Just like we deal with all that other stuff that's going on there. So what do you hope that happens in Coral Gables in the next 6 months to a year?
I really do hope that this movement that has happened, look, like everything else, right? There's a pendulum movement from one side to the other. I think the real estate market is putting a significant pressure on the commission to continue to build because there's a demand for housing. And that puts, I think David Winker said that here the other day, that there's a real question as to what the future of Coral Gables is going to be. Are we going to continue to be a residential place, or are we going to become more urban? Okay. What does it mean to be more urban in Coral Gables with a Mediterranean feel? How does that jive with Judge Merrick's view and goal and design? I don't think it jives with it. I think we're not supposed to be an urban city. I think it was supposed to be a neighborhood, a simple neighborhood in which people just be able to hang out, which is part of the reason that there has been such an uproar with the Coral Gables Country Club, because of the changes that we want to do there. Folks really want to preserve the identity of what it's like to be a Gables resident. And my real hope is that the commission sort of takes that in face value, that they essentially ignore, or at least to the best of their ability, they ignore the special interests who are pushing everything they can to continue to do this out of control building. And they do follow the leadership of Commissioner Anderson. And we go forward with preserve, not saying no to development and growth and change, because there'll be some change, right? There'll be higher population. The lifestyle we have today will have to change. There's no question. But there's middle ground, okay? And I think the middle ground is there to be found. And that is my hope, that they really take that vision in their hands, and that they understand that this is what their residents want at this particular point in time.
So Javier, you're so right that there's the pendulum swings this way, swings that way.
Right.
That's the way life is, right?
It is.
Sun comes up, sun goes
goes
down.
down.
It's going to
Right.
rain in between, maybe snow, depending on where you are. We're all looking forward to a little bit cooler. We have 2 minutes left. And we know, thank you, Andres. We know the cooler weather is around the corner. Halloween is like
Miami cooler weather, which
Yes.
is not.
so. My wife is on. She's in Minneapolis. She said bike was 46 today, and she's from there, so she loves it.
Right.
So I wish you well,
Thank you very
and
much.
I hope your family is doing well and productive, and your kids are doing great. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much.
My
Nice
pleasure.
to see you.
Again, our guest today is Javier Banos, an attorney and activist in the city of Coral Gables. Thanks for your time. And Andres, Peanut, thank you very much for producing the show. See you later, guys.
Thank you, Mike.